Hey guys, so today is going to be a pretty quick stream. I'm actually going to go into this view. I think it's a bit better. Um, how are you guys doing? Here. I'm good. How about you? I'm good too. Thank you. Um, so your overlay is really nice. Oh, thanks. Anyway, today we're going to just go over what we did before in Python, and we're going to start our first exercise, and we're going to talk a little bit about functions. So at this moment, I'm going into the courses on the website. I'm just going to go into the first part just to kind of go through what we just went through, right? So we talked about uh, programming basics and what Python is and all of that. We did our little Hello World program. We installed our editor, and we're able to make our first Hello World program, and we got a little quiz. I'm just going to be going through the quiz. It's pretty simple. So which one prints Hello World on the screen would be this one. And yeah, from descending order from high level to low level would be, so first we have Python, then assemblies at the bottom, C++, C assembly, submit. Is Python usually considered an interpreted or compiled language? Interpreted, submit answer, and that's it. So let's finish it up. And it's been submitted. By the way, if you guys don't know how to check it out, you can just go into the programming course outline, details, and you can see the answer paper here. Hopefully you guys can see this, yeah. And then you can see like your attempt numbers, if you passed or not, total marks, the percentage, pretty easy. And don't worry, sometimes it tells you attempt number 2 error, like it adds an additional attempt. Still have to fix that, but you do have a lot of you have your answers here. Now for the second part, we of course introduced data types, which I think I already did before on the other videos, and a little bit about operators and conditionals. Variables and input, we did a little bit about variables as well. And then we have a little exercise, which was the exercise I left the other stream at. So we're going to be going through this exercise first. So the idea is pretty simple. Just checking if everyone can see this. It's pretty small, so let's put it up. Okay. What's your graphics card? I don't have one. Not an integrated one. Sorry, not a dedicated one anyway. Not on this computer. Anyway, so the idea is to create a program that will ask the user for input, and or more specifically for the year they were born in, and if the user is older than 50, it should print you're too old. If it's between 16 and 49, it should print please come in, and if it's younger than 16, it should print you're too young. Oh, thank you very much for this for the follow, spoiler. Oh, sorry, for the host. That's what it was. So let's start doing this. I'm gonna open up here our VS Code. So it should be VS Code. VS Code. Code. There we go. Okay. Okay. So this is for other stuff that we're going to do at some point. Now, I'm not sure if I told you this before, but you can do comments with a little pound sign. A comment is just basically a little note that you can put in your program. It's not going to be read by the interpreter. It's not going to be executed. The computer just ignores it completely. It's just so that you can know what's going on when you look at your code again, or if someone else looks at your code, and you can type a couple of things. So you have your comment. So the comment is usually done with the pound sign. So if you have a pound sign, everything that comes after it is going to be a comment. And you can see it's green. So if you have like print hello, and then you put a little pound, everything else in this line is going to be a comment. So everything after this is going to be completely ignored. You can do multi-line comments as well with triple quotes. So anything inside of these triple quotes are comments. This is also going to be useful in the future, but for now, this is definitely in the new documents here, but I'm not sure if I went over it last time. What's the difference in using slash for pound? Oh, well, it depends on the programming language. In Python, double slash does not mean a comment. Double slash is just it's a different syntax basically. For Python, the equivalent to double slash is the pound, and yeah, and the equivalent, for example, in C, you do something like this, right? The equivalent is the triple quotes. So like this would be the same thing as this, except this does not exist in Python, right? So it would give you an error. It's just a different syntax depending on the language. But like in C or C++, it would be basically the same thing. So you would do this and then the comment, but it would not be multi-line, right? So you'd have to do it like every single line, except if you do that, you can just have multi-line and then at the end, you know. So it's the same thing as what I just described for Python, but a different syntax for both of these. So the first thing we want to do is ask user for input, right? I'm just putting it here so we can see the steps really easily. So first of all, we need to do input, and it tells us to ask what year were you born in with a space at the end. It's going to be important for the website to figure out if the code is correct or not. That's why I specified with a space here. And if we run this, by the way, so let's run this. We should also have our other window capture terminal. Wait a second. Terminal. There we go. We should have this here as well. We should probably increase the font a little bit. So let's have it at 24. Okay. So you guys can probably see this already. This is great. So if we run this, now the file is called bouncer.py, so I'm just going to go python bouncer.py. It's going to ask us what year you were born in, and by the way, the space is so that it's not so that you don't start typing right after the question mark. The space here. So you can just say 2020, but it doesn't do anything, right? Because we didn't tell it to do anything yet. So we have to fix that. So YOB, so year of birth, equals this. And now we have this inside of a variable. Now we can do whatever we want with the variable. Now it's important to note that if you do, for example, we can do an if statement, but if you do, for example, if your birth is greater than 1990, print you're a relic, actually, sorry, less than, this will not work as intended, and I'll show you why in a bit. If we run this, we can say, let's say 1880. It's going to give you an error. This is not supported between string and integer. And this is because, well, the input function, this function returns a string. So whatever you type when it asks you for the input is going to store it in this variable as a string. So if you do print type UB, you're going to notice that when you run this, you can say like hello, right? And it's going to be a string, but if you also just do 100, it's still a string. Everything you type in here is going to go into this variable as a string. So that's important to understand. So how can we change this? Because we want to be able to check if the number is greater than a certain number, and so we need this to be an integer instead of a string. So the way you can do this is you can typecast. So let's go into the terminal again, just for some quick demo. Let's go into the interactive shell. So if you have a equals 3, right, this is an integer. Now if you have a equals 3 like this is going to be a string. So if you go type a, it's going to be a string now. Now what we can do is we can typecast, which means we can convert the type of the variable into a different type. So we can do something like int a, it's a function, right? And when we try to get the type of this, it's going to be an integer, because we have the int funct. It takes whatever goes inside of here, right? So you can do 100, and it's going to return an integer. So if you do type of this, it's going to be an integer. Now it's important to note it will only work if the types are compatible, right? You cannot transform hello into a number. This will give you an error. So with this in mind, also you can similarly do this with other types. So you can have 3, which would be, so type 3 is an integer, right? But if you want to convert this into a string, you can do this, and it converts it into a string. So str, whatever's inside, you have int, you have bytes, basically every data type we discussed before you can do this with. The input gets stored in the A. Okay, yeah, let me this up here. So when we have, maybe it's better with a terminal. So the input function, and we're gonna go through functions today. The input function takes an argument, takes a string, so you can have like hello something or type here, and it's going to print this string. It's going to be similar to the print function, right? Except the difference is that after it prints this, it's going to wait for you to type something, and it's going to wait for you to press enter to get the new line key. So when you press enter, whatever you type is going to go into its variable, but right now it doesn't go anywhere because you didn't specify a variable. But if I specify a variable, a equals input type here, now whatever you type here, blah, is going to go into the variable a. So now if you try to get a, it's going to have blah, right? And we're going to understand it actually a little bit better when we talk about functions, why this happens in this way. Okay, this is what I wanted to see. Yeah, exactly. So as we continue on, we now know that this needs to be a number, right? So what we can do is we can do int and put this inside, right? Now whatever comes into here, whatever comes out of here is going to go into int. It's going to get an integer, so this is now going to be an integer. So now if we print type yob, and of course we have to run it as well. Oops. And you do 100, now this is going to be an integer. Perfect. Oops. So now what we need to do is check the year that people were born in and try to figure out their age, right? So what's the age? The age is going to be the year we're in right now, so 2020, minus the year of birth, right? Now what do we need to do? Let's go back into our I'm just going to copy paste this. So just copy paste this. This is the instructions from the website, right? I'm just copy pasting here so that we know what the instructions are. Can I enter a list as an input in this input function? Okay, I'm assuming what you're asking is if whatever I type in here, so wait a second, let me get the terminal back up. So if you have input type here, I'm assuming what you're asking is if I can put a list in here, so if I can do like 1, 2, 3. This I cannot do. Well, if I do this, it will interpret anything I write as a string, right? So if we get A, this is a string, right? However, you can convert this into a list if you want to. Now there are a couple different ways to do this, but and we're going to go into it a bit further when we go into after we go into functions, because it's a bit more complex. But you can technically convert this into a list if you want to. But anything that you type in here is going to be an integer, is going to be a string. Yeah, it's a bit more advanced for now, but we will get to it, I promise. So just to finish up this part here, we now need to check if this age is going to be bigger than 50, because if it is bigger than 50, I need to print this. So I'm going to copy this. Oops. So I'm going to copy this and say if age is greater than 50, print that. Right? Now, I could just do ifs, right? Because it's not overlapping. I can just do if age is greater than, now it's between 16 and 49, so greater than 16 and age smaller than 49, well, smaller or equal to 49, greater or equal to 16. By the way, this is not the way I'd recommend doing it, because I'll show you in a bit, but you can technically do this, and then if age is less than 16, and oops, you're too young, right? Just the most obvious way to do it. So if the age is bigger than 50, it will print this. If it's bigger or equal to 16, but smaller or equal to 49, it will print this. If it's less than 16, it prints this, right? So if is the start of a loop. Yeah, sorry. It's not a, well, if is a conditional operator, right? So it starts the conditional statement, I mean. So it's just going to check, by the way, you can see this, right? Yeah. It's just going to check if this happens, right? And then after you have the if, you can add all sorts of things. You can add the else, the elif, and we're going to see this in a minute. I just want to run this so that you guys can see that this is actually working. So what year were you born in? So let's say 2005. That's pretty young, I think. You are too young. Perfect. Now if I say, let's say 1990, please come in. Now let's say, yeah, you're too old. Perfect. So it's working, but this is not the most pleasant way to do this, or efficient, because what's going to happen is first it's going to see if this is true, right? It's going to check this, and if it's true, it's going to print it, right? But it's going to be sequential, so it's going to check this, and if it is true, print it, perfect, and then it's going to check this again, and then if it's true, it prints it, and then it's going to check this again. Now this is not very efficient, because let's say you put a year that gives 15 age, right? It's first going to check if it's I'm sorry, let's do it the other way around. Let's say you input a year that gives an age over 50. So it's going to check first if it's over 50, and it's true, so it will print it. Then it will check again if this is true, which it will never be, because, right? And then it will still check this again. So a better way to do it is with the elif and the else statements that you can apply after you have an if statement. So you can do the same thing, except you can do this. And this will basically be the exact same thing. And so let me explain what what's happening here. So after this is checked, if this is true, of course it prints this, right? And that's it. Now if this is false, then it starts checking the elif, right? The elif is essentially the same thing as saying like else if something, right? It's going to only run if this is false. So, oops. So if this is false, it's going to check if it's bigger or equal to 16. And remember, we only need to check this because we know this is false, so it has to be less than 50. So if it's less than 50 and and greater or equal to 16, this will be printed. Else, so if none of these are met, this happens. So in the case that it's over 50, only this condition is checked. Everything else is never checked. In the case that this is triggered, only these two are checked. Only this requires both of the first ones to be checked, so it's a little bit more efficient. If, elif, and else is always the last one, right? Yeah, so the else is always the last one when you have an if statement because, well, it's the end of the condition. So you have a set of conditions. If none of those conditions are met, then the else does its job. So if you do something like this, right? I guess this is a bit weird, but if you do something like this and we try to run this, you'll see that it gets an error, right? Because once you have the else, this is considered to be the end of the if statement, right? The else terminates the if statement. So if you have an else, that's the end of the if statement. You cannot have more elifs. So the elifs come between the if and the else always, basically. But note that you don't need to have an else and you don't need to have an elif, but if you have both, the elif always comes before the else. So yeah, now that this is done, we can try running it now again. So again, 1990, please come in because this is nice. Let's say 1800, I'm too old, and now let's say I was born in 2005, you're too young. Perfect. Seems like it's working. Let's test this solution in our browser here. So I'm just going to copy paste it. So I'm going to copy it here. I'm going to paste it here. And you guys can see this, right? I'm just going to check answer. Now, if it doesn't tell you that there's an error, it's good, right? There was no error, it's good. If you click check answer again, it will do the same thing. If there's no error, your answer is good. You can also check the solution, which is basically the same thing, right? Because actually I think it's the exact, oh, I do the int conversion here instead of here, but it's the same thing. And then we can finish the exercise, and yeah. Next, and now don't forget that, oops, did I mess it up somehow? Oh, this is the next one, never mind. There are two exercises. We're going to go through the other one in a bit. Don't forget that you can check your answer paper here, so the bouncer exercise, answer paper, passed, blah, blah. And then it will tell you the test cases. I tested with 1997, 1936, and 2015. And it will, yeah. I guess this is, yeah. There's nothing else to see here. Now the other exercise is pretty simple as well. And it basically tells you the following program asks for input and stores it in variable number. Yep, pretty much. Complete this program in order to print even or odd based on the number. So, okay, so let's quit here. We have parity. There we go. Print even or odd. So this is a super simple exercise, and so again, this needs to be an integer because we want to make operations to it, so int. Now what we want to do is we want to check if number, when it's divided by 2, if the remainder is equal to 0. Remember, our modulus operator is the remainder, if you check, I can't check it now, but if you check the lesson regarding operators, actually I have it. Oh wait, this is not showing. My bad. So again, remember we have to put the int here so that the input is an integer, and we can check if the remainder when it's divided by 2 is 0. So if you don't remember it, you can go check the operators lesson before, and it should have the modulus operators, which is basically a division, except it returns the remainder of the division. So that should be quite easy. And of course, if it's divisible by the number, the remainder is 0. So we can print, even. And if the remainder is not 0, then it has to be odd. Right? There we go. So if we copy and we paste this into the browser, and now we check answer, it's probably going to be correct again. Go, no errors, finish. Yeah, there we go. Next. Perfect. Now we can go into our parity check, view answer paper, and there we go. Marks 1. This is the solution, by the way, that it was offered in the exercise, and it's basically what we did. Yeah. And remember, like there's always going to be an extra attempt because I haven't fixed that quite yet. But oh well. So now I wanted to get into functions a little bit, and this is going to be pretty quick. I'm going to have the document for it later today or tomorrow morning. We'll see. It's going to be updated in the course soon, though, hopefully. So we talked a little bit about functions before already, and we know the print function, we know the input function, we know the type function, and technically we have the int and the ways to typecast into different types. Although we'll get into it. But so what is a function? So as said before, the function is basically a subroutine, a definition of a block of code. Right? I'm going to define a function here. To define a function, you type def for define, space the name of the function, so function name, with your 2 parentheses, and then a colon. After this, an indentation level, remember that? Anything that is typed into here is going to be part of the function. Anything inside of this indentation level, of course. So if we run this program, don't worry, you'll understand functions better in a minute. If we run this program, so functions, it won't do anything, right? Because we've just defined the function, we didn't call it. By defining the function, we are basically saying that this function will execute all of this code if it's called. So let's call it function name. This is how you call it, in the same way that you'd print hello, right? You call this with the parentheses. So let's run it now. Oh, you didn't see this, sorry. That's what I was saying. So this is how you call it, in the same way you'd call a print function. Except we don't have any arguments inside, and we'll get to that. So if we execute this, it's going to print hi 5 times. That's what was in this section. So and this is very useful because you can have a function that does a set of things that you want to do many times in a row, or just reuse in your code, and you don't have to type every single thing all the time. You can just type the function that does that for you. Keeps your code organized and reuses a lot, so you don't have a lot of duplicate code inside of your program. That's really all there is to functions, but now there's something I haven't touched yet, which is the arguments. So these functions, this function only prints, right? So I'm going to say print func. By the way, you cannot call it just print because there's a function called print already, and this is going to be pretty confusing, right? Because now when you call print, which one are you referring to? print that already exists or your new print function. Right, so I'm just going to call it print function. And it's going to print hi. So when we execute print function, again, it's just going to say hi. So let's change the functionality a bit. What if we want to pass an argument? This function doesn't use any arguments, right? It's a static code. But what if we want to pass an argument in the same way where you do print hello, right? You're passing hello as an argument. I want to do that with this function too. So I want to print hello with my function. Well, the way you do this is inside of these parentheses, you specify the variables that it accepts. So let's say it accepts the variable x. Right? You can put x and y for two variables. Let's put x. And now print, we want to print x. It's going to get this first variable and put it into x. So now, when we run it, it prints hello. And we can do hello world here. And when we run it, it's going to print hello world. Alright, pretty simple. Now, these variables can be of any type, and it's in order. So if you do x, y, z, and you try this, it's going to give you an error, because it's missing two required positional arguments, because I specified it needs y and z, but there's no y and z, right? So I can just say 1 and 2. Now there's a y and z. It's still just going to print hello world, because we are only printing x, but we can print x, y, and z, and it will print hello world 1 and 2, right? So in order, these are the arguments that are accepted. I'm sorry, I don't understand your language. And Gomong Apan Si? No idea. Anyway, so this is how you define variables to be inside. Now, what if you want variables that don't necessarily appear? So let's say we have x and we have y, but if y exists, we want to print. Hey, thank you so much for the follow, Frosty? Frosty's dad. Oh wow, okay. Hey, y exists. Else print x. Okay, so this function is going to accept x and y, and if y, we're going to print, hey, y exists, and else we're going to print x. Now this is difficult because, well, if we just do this and we run, it's going to give us, hey, y exists because we gave a y, but if we don't give a y, it's going to give us an error, right? Because obviously we said we require this argument. So we can set this to 0. And now when we run this, it's just going to print hello world. What this means when you set it to 0 is if it is not passed, it will be 0. If it is passed, it will be whatever value you set it for. But, so if you put 1 here, hey, y exists, because now it takes this and attributes it to y, right? You don't have anything, it's the default, which is 0. You're just setting a default value. Notice that when you do this, for example, and now you have 1, now you have 2. Actually, I'm going to print I is, I think we went through formatted strings, but if we didn't, it's really easy too. Just trying to show you some functionality. At this point, hey man, just learning a bit, some of the stuff, and I'm learning how to card and everything. Okay. Some of that stuff might be illegal, so I would not recommend that at all. But this stuff is definitely worth learning. Okay, so as I was saying, by the way, formatted strings, I think I went over them before, but it's really easy. So you just put an F before the string. So a normal string is just 2 quotes, right? if you put a formatted string, it's just an F and 2 quotes, and it's just like a normal string, except you can use these curly braces, so open and closed, to input variable names and everything. So inside of these you can put expressions and variable names. So that's what I did there. So hey, y is, and then this is the value of y. Hey, z is, and this is the value of z. Now, I told you that this would be in order, so hello world into here, 1 into here, 2 into here. However, what happens if you do this? Well, if you run this, it's going to tell you that y is 2 and z is 1, even though you put z first, even though you put 1 first and 2 afterwards. Obviously, because you're telling the function that z is going to be equal to 1 and y is going to be equal to 2. Now, if you do something like this, however, wait, this is not what I want. We'll get into this. This is a bit too complex. I wanted to show you something different, but it's a bit too complex, so I'm not going to show it right now. But let's do this and do this. Sorry, this was the default. And yeah, obviously it's going to tell us hello world because x was the input parameter. So yeah, just a little reminder that you can do things like this. So what I wanted to, so this is basically functions, and I will be exploring this a bit better and a bit more organized in the document that I'll be putting in the lesson soon. But yeah, today I just wanted you to be introduced to functions a little bit, solve the exercises before, and give you the new exercise for today, which will also be in the document and in the website soon, but you can work on it already. It's the same thing as the parity exercise, except I want you to make a function, and I want you to make, I completely forgot to touch on a very important aspect of functions. I'm sorry. Def is odd, or is even. I'm sorry, I completely forgot to check on this, to go over this. So normally, well, I'm going to be explicit so that you guys don't get too confused. So, okay, else print odd. So we know that we can do this, right? And this is an is-even function. So if we call is-even with the number 2, right? You guys can see it? Yeah. We can, so let's call this. It's even, right? But now if we call this with the number 3, it's going to tell us it's odd. Now this program doesn't return anything, right? So if we print the function, we're going to be printing the result of the function, not this, the result of the function. It says none. What is the result of the function? It's what the function returns. So the function prints a couple things, but it doesn't return anything. To return something, you have to specify a return value. That's done with the keyword return. So we can return 0. And now, if you run it again, it's going to say odd because that's what was printed in the function, and then 0 because that's the return value from the function. So when we say, for example, return value equals, so when you set a variable to a function, the variable is always going to have the return value of this function. So if we print the return value, it's, again, odd is just because it was printed, and then 0 because we said return 0 here. All right? If you say return 1, the same thing. This will have odd and then 1. Now, what we want is to, so if we want to house, if we want to have a variable equal to whatever this function result is, we have to return it instead of print it. So what we can do is, right here, instead of print, we can return. by the way, what return will do is it will immediately exit the function, right? If a return is hit, the function will be exited, and it will hold the value of the return, right? So in this case, it's going to return even, or it's going to return odd. Remember, as soon as it returns, it just exits the function and returns that value. So when we set this return value equal to the function, the result of the function is going to be put in return value, which means the return value of the function is going to be put into here, and then we print it. So let's try this again. Boom, odd, and if we do 2, again it's even. Now this is not, I'm printing the return value right here, because normally the return value would not be printed, right? If I just do this and run it, there's no print, because again I didn't print anything, right? It's just saving even or odd into this variable. And this is why, for example, when you do a equals input blah, right? What this function is doing is similar to this, except it takes in something, and it's going to be a string, and then it waits for your input, and whatever input happens, it's going to return that input. That's why it gets stored into here, right? Because it returns, the same way we return odd or even, it returns it, and as such is going to be going into this, right? So that's probably an easy thing that I forgot to mention before. It's really important because now when we go into the parity exercise, and this is what I wanted to leave you guys with, the exercise. So the exercise is the same thing, except making a function that will return whether a specific number is even or odd without using the modulus operator. Right? So exercise 2 for today. Well, whenever you guys get the chance, I will be uploading all of this into the website, including the exercise, later, maybe tomorrow, but you can already work on this. So return odd or even. Yeah, make a function that returns odd or even and takes one argument. So essentially what I want you to do is do the same thing, like is even, and takes x or y or whatever you want to call it, and then it's going to return odd, or it's going to return even, or return odd, depending on some stuff, right? I don't want to do it to you. So depending on whether it's even or odd, it's going to return it without the modulus operator. Okay? So this is the difficulty, without the modulus operator. And we'll be going through this next week. Is there any question? So this is basically the last part. If there are any questions, I would gladly answer them. If not, I will say good day or good night. Gonna wait for a couple minutes. Hopefully this was, I know this was a pretty quick one. We'll be going more into functions next week as well. It's just a little introduction. I think I get it. That's awesome. And definitely practice this because, you know, practice is the most important step in learning anything. Anything at all. Also, by the way, when you come to this exercise, please try not to use Google because the idea is for you to try to figure out a creative way to do this without the modulus operator. I mean, you can try to use Google as well, but I would try not to if, you know, at least only try Google after a couple hours of trying, definitely, okay? That would be my recommendation. Okay, I'm guessing there are no questions. So thank you so much for coming by, and have a good Sunday. See you next week. And next week I'll make a bigger, a longer stream.